Hi guys, welcome to another Get Ready with me. My name's Alexa and I am a trans woman currently living in Glasgow. And in this video, I really wanted to talk about some of the cosmetic procedures that I've had done to help me progress in my transition. I did just want to put a small disclaimer out saying that I will be posting a few images that may be a little bit uncomfortable for people to look at, and I will be talking a little bit about trauma, depression and grief. So I just wanted to put that out there. I've always said that I wanted to create content that the younger me would have appreciated and that maybe I didn't have at the time during my transition. So I hope that this can be somewhat educational and beneficial for those that are thinking about getting facial feminization or cosmetic procedures that will help them to progress in their transition. But let's get into the video. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about my experience with cosmetic surgery and the surgeries that I have had to progress within my transition. So I had my facial feminization surgery about 6 years ago. There is still a video on YouTube that my best friend filmed and documented the whole process. So I will link that video here. The reason I had facial feminization was because I had obviously gone through a male puberty. I was very conscious about my features. I didn't feel comfortable in public. I didn't feel like I blended in very naturally, and it was just an insecurity of mine. And so I really wanted to get this surgery. Now there seems to be this kind of bucket list where trans people feel the pressure to have to get a certain amount of surgeries to feel passable. I think today I'm just going to do like a very smoky eye and just kind of run with it and see what we come up with. I'm just going to use my little Curator eyeshadow palette from Hourglass. It's such a mess, but this is a palette that you can customize your own shades, so I use it like literally every day. So for my surgery, I had a brow bone contouring and reshaping. I had a brow lift, a hairline lowering. I had a rhinoplasty. I think that was it. So facial feminization is a very common surgery for trans women to have, that it just refines their features and gives them more softer feminine features. I was quite anxious about getting it done because I knew how I wanted to look, but I was kind of scared on how the final results were going to look. I didn't want it to look too overdone, but I knew that there were certain things that I really wanted to get done. I'm just going to use one of the House Labs cream eyeshadows just because they're like a really incredible waterproof formula and they give you such a beautiful pigment that's like very strong. So we're going to do more of like a brown smoky eye. So my overall experience having the surgery went incredibly well. I made such good friends with the staff at the clinic and they were so sweet and so helpful in terms of like my recovery and my aftercare. Now my surgery, although the surgery went incredibly well, I suffered with a really bad infection. The reason I think it's important to talk about this is because on social media, it kind of comes across, I always feel like, as this before and after, before surgery and after surgery. And it's this like Cinderella story of going through this transformation where you do this big reveal at the end and it's like amazing and euphoric. And I love that. And I love that people are able to have that. But my experience was anything but that. I think a lot of trans women don't necessarily document the in-between process and the emotional turmoil and the difficulty of having to heal. It was such a traumatic experience. This is why I feel a little bit anxious about posting this, because it is 6 years later, but I'm still kind of dealing with self-esteem issues from this surgery. And I think with everything going on in the media, with how trans people are portrayed, I just think it's important to share your story so that other trans people can gain a better knowledge and an understanding of these surgeries. And I in no way want to scare or put off anyone from having this surgery. I think it was one of the most life-changing things I've ever had done to me, but it was an incredibly traumatic recovery and I really wanted to share my experience. So my situation with my surgery was everything seemed to go really well. I had my cast taken off and everything and I was so happy with the results. You can see in the video that I've linked the process and me having my cast removed and everything. The only thing that my surgeon noticed, he was like, your forehead is really shiny. It's really swollen. And he was like, keep an eye on that. And I was noticing very early on, I remember I got on the flight home and it was something to do with the pressure. It just made everything kind of like blow up by like 50%. I got home and my head was like a balloon. And for the next few days, I noticed like a lot of fluid coming out of like some of the scar tissue. And I was experiencing a lot of pain. And my mum's a nurse, so I would constantly be on the phone to her being like, is this normal? And she'd be like, yeah, like it's just fluid buildup, just wait for it to heal. So I was just trying to be as patient as possible. But I think it got to like, maybe like a few days after me getting home from the surgery, keeping in mind I'd recovered for about a week, and I was in so much pain. The swelling was so bad. And I remember I was on the phone to my mom, just like crying my eyes out, being like, I need you. I remember when it got to its worst, I was like throwing up because the pain was so bad. Like the pressure on my forehead was excruciating. And I remember I went to my GP and they gave me like tons of antibiotics and were just like, it might just be swelling, give it time. Not really paying much attention. As soon as you mention you've had surgery abroad, they're just like, I don't want to deal with you. It got so bad to the point where I was going to like the walk-in clinic being like, I don't understand what's going on. Why is it not healing? It's just getting worse. Like at this point, I just thought it was part of the healing process and that I just wasn't healing very well. Anyway, it went down. Everything seemed to be fine. There was still quite a lot of swelling. The pain had gone and everything seemed to be okay. So I would say this would be maybe about 4 weeks after the surgery. I started to develop a slight blistering on my right eye, on the lid around here. And I would go to my local walk-in clinic and ask them if there's anything that they could give me. And at this point, I was on so many antibiotics. I was just like, I just want the pain to go. I want the swelling to go. I've got this really beautiful palette by Fyne that I got on TikTok Shop. And the pigments are so insane. So I'm gonna try one of these today. Anyway, I was going to like my local walk-in, like honestly, I was going like every day. And I would get up at like 7, go as soon as they'd opened. And they just did not want to touch me because of obviously it was a surgery that I'd had abroad. As soon as you mention cosmetic surgery, they're just like, pfft. I remember finally I saw someone that was like, we're going to extract the fluid that's in your eye and we're going to investigate and see what's caused this infection. And by this time, my eye had swollen up and was like almost closed completely. And it was just like this huge buildup of fluid and pus. It looked horrific. Anyway, they like essentially stabbed my eye with a scalpel. And I just remember my eye filling up with pus. And this doctor just like wiping away. And these like wet tissues after wet tissues were just like, it was bad. It was bad. It was bad. It was honestly so scary. I was just like, I have done this to myself. I'm going to be disfigured. It was crazy. They were able to tell me that the reason I had an infection, it was from like an airborne, something that might have been picked up in the surgery. I think it was linked to like surgery utensils or something potentially being contaminated. I don't know. But they said it's common, but that I had left it so long to get it checked up. And I tried to argue being like, I've been here every morning at like 7 a.m. and it has taken you guys like weeks to investigate this. And I'm not blaming the NHS, but they just didn't want to deal with me. And I get it, I'd had cosmetic surgery, but I was so scared and so vulnerable and I just didn't know what to do at this point and it was getting so much worse. How gorgeous is that shimmer, by the way? Beautiful. Okay, we've added some lashes, we've done a liner, so I'm just gonna start working on the complexion. So at this point I had literal blisters on my eye and it was so gross because I would literally have to get up in the night to like drain them because they would just fill up with like fluid and pus. This is so gross. And I would have to get up in the night to like drain my eyes essentially, and I would sleep with like dressing covering it so that it wouldn't like build up in my eye. At this point I got in contact with my clinic and they immediately were like, you need to come in for surgery and we are going to have to remove this infection and potentially remove the cement that they had used to shape my forehead. I'm so grateful at this point that I had like my best friend living with me and the support from other friends in my family to help me get through this. I had to fly back out to Belgium to the clinic about a week later, I think it was, to go in for like immediate surgery. And they were incredible. They worked really, really fast. They made sure to like get everything booked in as like an emergency. And I just remember praying that I didn't have to come back for a third surgery. If they had to remove the cement to shape my forehead, I would then have to come back again several months later to get that put back in. And at this point, I would have been open like 3 times. So a little bit too much information, but they basically make a scar from here to here where they make an incision, they peel back the skin from your forehead, and then they will like shave down your brow bone and then fill it in with cement to shape your forehead to give it that kind of like nice round profile. So we did this, and then I of course had the infection, and then I had to fly back to get the infection removed. So I remember waking up from the surgery, and the nurse immediately told me like they had to remove the cement from my forehead, which meant that I would need another surgery a few months later down the line. I just remember crying my eyes out and like going back to sleep and just not dealing with that situation right then. Yeah, it was pretty traumatic. As someone that doesn't like to have surgery or won't do it unless they feel like it's a necessity, having facial feminization surgery was a huge step for me. And it was the first, I think it was the first, one of the first times I think that I'd been put under. And it was incredibly nerve-wracking, and I had to be put under a 3rd time. Now I understand that this is just the part of the process that had to be done at this point because of the infection, and it couldn't be helped. And I was so grateful for the clinic helping me with this. But when I say the next few months were just horrendous, I remember the swelling going down, and obviously I had nothing sat on top of my sinus plate. It was just like removed cement. And I'm not kidding, I would be able to like breathe in like that, and you would see my forehead like collapse as it just sat on like my sinus plate, and I would inhale and it would just concave. Like, it was crazy. I finally went for my 3rd surgery where they were able to make sure that there was no infection left. I'd been on antibiotics for weeks at this point, and I actually built up a strange intolerance to antibiotics. I was starting to purge like really bad, dry, almost like cystic acne. And I've been on antibiotics since then, like years later for something, and my body reacted in the exact same way. So now I don't do well with antibiotics at all. I think I maybe overdid it. I think what was the most difficult thing for me was going through that surgery and then being in recovery and not really being able to do anything for like 6 months because I was just having surgery after surgery. And so I was pretty isolated and I couldn't go out and do anything. I remember it was Pride while I was living in Manchester, so all my friends were like getting ready and getting dressed up, going to Pride, and I was there looking like Quasimodo's sister with like my eye seeping and just having to be embarrassed and like explain to people that were coming over like what had happened. After I had healed and gone through everything, I was in such a kind of traumatized state with everything that had happened. I wasn't really able to process it, and I wasn't able to fully appreciate how I looked at the time. Like, everything had healed, my eye had healed. I'll also put a picture of how that looked because it was crazy. I had like a scar that just completely lifted my eye, and it's crazy to think that they were able to fix that, and really you can't see anything now. So I'm incredibly grateful for them. The team were so supportive and so quick, they acted so quickly. But to say I was really struggling was an understatement. I wasn't able to fully appreciate how I looked. It had kind of tarnished the experience for me, and I was just grateful to be over surgery. I know it sounds silly, but I was just grateful to go out in the fresh air and to walk around and not feel horrified of how I looked anymore. So I was fully able to appreciate that, but I wasn't able to appreciate how I looked. There was no kind of sense of euphoria. And it took a few years before I was able to really be like, okay, like everything's good. There's no more infections. I was just so conscious that every time I got like a spot or something, I was like, it's an infection. I'm going to have to go back and get more surgery. And yeah, it was rough. Because I was struggling so bad at the time, I was going to my GP and telling them how like depressed I was. And they actually prescribed me Prozac at the time. And it was just before we went into lockdown. So I had only just started to go back out in public again. And they'd given me this Prozac, and it made me feel 50 times worse. I know that they say that you can feel worse before you get better, but I, at that time, couldn't have possibly felt any worse. And it was scary. I really, really struggled with my mental health to the point where I don't know how much to share. I guess it's just better to be honest in case other people are experiencing it and going through it. But I essentially remember being in a very desperate state and panicking and feeling so low that I just never thought that I would be able to get out of that headspace. And I ended up taking all of my antidepressants in one go. And you can kind of imagine the effects of that. And yeah, that was, I can't really explain the headspace that I was in because I honestly don't remember. I just remember feeling desperate and wanting to no longer have to deal with that feeling. So it was pretty rough. And then to go from that into lockdown and having to self-isolate again, I'm very grateful that I had my partner at the time to support me. It was difficult, and in hindsight, I'm a much happier person now, and I can't relate to who I was back then. But I really do not take surgery lightly now. It was something that I wanted to do for myself. I think a lot of people who are trans can relate to this. I especially, before I transitioned, I was kind of at rock bottom with my life. I didn't know really what to do with myself. I was incredibly depressed. I'd struggled with my depression since I was about 15. And I was just going out drinking and trying to like kind of numb how I felt at the time and disassociating. I got to a point in my life where I was just like, I don't think I could get in a worse state of how I felt about myself. And transitioning for me was kind of like a moment where I was just like, I have nothing left to lose. I kind of owe it to myself to actually give myself an opportunity at living the life that I feel I authentically should be living. So I honored myself and gave myself that permission to be my authentic self and transition. And it was the most life-changing thing for me. I think a lot of people talk about like the physical transformation, but for me, it was that kind of mental state of finally being like, I don't need to cater to other people. I don't need to try and live up to this standard that other people have of me. And I'm able to love myself fully and give myself permission to be who I am wholly and accept that. And I was so grateful to have like loving friends and family to support me. And I understand that that's such a huge privilege as well. So I'm incredibly grateful for those that love me unconditionally and allow me to be myself. And I've seen so many surgeries over the last few years of some of my closest friends having work done, and they look phenomenal. And I'm so glad that everything's worked out for them. And I know that I'm probably one of the few that have had like complications like this. So I still think it's important to talk about. And I feel like I owe it to people within the community that kind of want to understand a little bit more about surgery, and sharing my experience can allow them to, I guess, take the opportunity to research into it a little bit more and to learn more about the aftercare. So I'm going to use the H&B Glossy Skin Tint just to add warmth and definition to my skin. I haven't used this in ages and it's so good. I don't know why I haven't, but here we go. I forget how like creamy this is. Like, I'm not big on contour. I like just doing like a soft cream bronzer, but this is just like the most creamy formula and it blends so seamlessly and it's very, very buildable. I always feel like the media kind of perpetuate this idea of trans people as somebody who has had all these really unattainable, unrealistic cosmetic surgeries, like having your ribs removed, or they showcase us as the complete opposite and show someone that isn't as, I guess you would say, like passable, whatever that means nowadays, and ridicule them for that. And no one ever talks about like the working class girlies that are just like working their 9 to 5, trying to pay for their surgeries. Like, we're not just one thing. Some people just are living their lives and trying not to draw attention to themselves. And I think for the longest time, I've put off talking about my experience and my transition because I don't want to come across like somebody that thinks they know it all, they've experienced it all. I still feel so new to this, and I'm like 8 years into my transition. I'm still figuring it out. I'm still learning about myself and trying to understand myself. And it's only recently that I've been able to appreciate my journey and how far I've come. And I just want to kind of bask in like the peace and quiet of life at the moment. Now that I've recently moved to Glasgow and I'm not having to deal with like the chaos of London and working in London, I'm just at a point where I'm just like, I'm cute, I'm cool in my little apartment, listening to my movie score soundtracks and watching my history documentaries. I'm pretty low key. I just want to have a normal life. And it's so sad with what's going on at the moment, where we're even having to debate our existence or where we're using the toilets. And people tend to underestimate the journey that we go through. We're firstly not claiming to be biological women. I own, and it's taken me a long time to own, that I'm a trans woman, and I'm so proud of that. And the lineage of like trans women that have come before us is so empowering. And I just want to kind of do my community as proud as I can and focus really hardly on just loving myself, because I feel like for years trans people experience this kind of pressure to be a certain way. And when you can finally get to where you are in life, where you can love and honor yourself by living authentically, you then have to deal with everyone else debating about you and debating about your body and what surgeries you have to have, and this like bucket list of surgeries that you should have to be more passable and to make people feel more comfortable. And I feel like for a lot of time I felt pressured to like get my voice down or to like have other surgeries, have a BBL and all this lot and whatever the girlies are having done these days, having your ribs snapped. I think more power to you if you want to do that and you have the funds to do that. Amazing. But my experience from surgery has traumatized me. Even when I had like breast surgery, I was just like, I'm really playing with fate right now, getting another surgery after everything that I went through. And thank God it all went according to plan, touch wood. You know I love a really obnoxious blush, so I'm just going to mix a little bit of my Hourglass blush with my Huda one to create that perfect like baby pink, that marshmallowy pink under eye. You know what's funny? I still haven't got the hang of doing my makeup on camera. I feel like I do everything in the wrong stages or do the process in a way that I wouldn't normally. Like I normally contour first, and I've done my concealer first, and it's all going over the place, love. And I feel like I'm so bad at multitasking. That's a skill I did not pick up when becoming a woman. That colour is bloody lovely. So after everything that had happened in this chapter of my life, unfortunately my surgeon passed away. I'm not too sure how long after the surgery. The timeline is very muddled. But that, in addition to everything, was obviously heartbreaking. And I don't want to go into too much about it out of respect for him and the clinic. It was just really incredibly heartbreaking after going through all of that. And it's kind of the last thing you would expect to hear after having someone spend such a long time with you and helping you through recovery and revisions. Yeah, that chapter of my life just felt very sad, and yeah, I did not expect to get emotional during this, but it was just a very rough kind of sequence of events that happened. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that he was able to do the surgery and I got to meet him and he was a part of that journey with me. I'm just so forever grateful. Yeah, it was just a really crazy chapter. I'm just at a point now where, with everything going on in the media and how trans people are perceived nowadays, it's just hard sometimes, and I tend to self-isolate a lot, and it's kind of my way of keeping my world very safe and having a very small circle of friends. It's kind of scary at the minute going out in public and just not really knowing how people are going to react to you. And I'm at this point where I'm just like, I don't care if people think I'm trans, I don't care if I'm clocky or whatever. I'm proud of who I am, and after everything that I've been through and everything that the community has to go through, the amount of people that have been unalived and the insane ridicule that they've had to endure, I just think to be visible and to stand proud and to still be here is something that I'm proud of. I didn't expect it to be emotional. Okay, we're gonna finish off with the nude lip of dreams. This is like my Pamela Anderson, like 90s supermodel nude lip that there ever was. So I'm using Uncover by Hourglass as my lip liner. And then a little bit of the Anastasia Beverly Hills Lip Velvet in Peachy Nude. And then I always do like a tiny little bit of concealer right in the middle to give you that sort of ombre lip. And then a little bit of the NYX lip oil in Chillin' Like a Villain. Okay, so this is the finished look. I'm gonna get my hair sorted and change into my outfit for the night, and I will be right back. And this is the finished look. I'm gonna finish off with a fragrance. Today we're using the Salted Muse by Bella. This is Bella Hadid's fragrance range, and it's very transportive, very fresh, kind of has that Mediterranean vibe to it, which is very appropriate for wet and rainy Glasgow. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope that it was informative. I wanted to put out a video that I knew could be helpful for people that are thinking about having facial feminization surgery. And I just want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you all very soon.